there, and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here each week, meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues. And today we welcome back a frequent guest, but it's very topical here because we're headed toward that big November election date.
Indeed. We are asking back, and he's agreed to show up, and he is, in fact, here. Dr. Keith Gaddie is going to talk about the runoff election and what he foresees for the general election coming up. Lots of interesting races, lots of interesting issues.
So much intrigue on the ballot coming up here in November. We'll be right back with that show. Dr. Keith Gaddie joining us today on The Verdict.
When I look around the Cultural Center campus, it is an amazing feeling to know that this is a home for Chickasaw people and history and culture, and it's a place that we share who we are with the world. My name is Valerie Walters, and I serve as the Executive Officer for the Division of Chickasaw Cultural Center, and I am Chickasaw. There's so many ways for people to feel comfortable to connect to their heritage. And for those who are not Chickasaw, for people to understand who we are and feel a little closer to us. It's a great feeling to know that for all of the hard work and dedication that our ancestors put forth, that we are here today to celebrate what we have, and we're here to share this with the world. It is a wonderful feeling to be able to be a part of this journey.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we welcome back to The Verdict Dr. Keith Gaddie. You've seen Keith, of course, before with us on the show, both as a guest and co-host. But we wanted Keith to come on today and talk about the most recent runoff election and what the slate looks like for the general election. Keith occupies a position of Executive Faculty Fellow at the University of Oklahoma, reporting to the President. He did his undergraduate work at Florida State. Did his master's and PhD work in political science at the University of Georgia. He has been chairman of the political science department at OU, still teaches in the political science department. He is known around the country as an election guru, and he's certainly our election guru for The Verdict. Welcome back, Keith. Sure glad to have you.
Kent, Mick, it's good to be back. I always enjoy getting around the table with the two of you.
Well, and politics is on everybody's mind right about now.
You can't get away from it. You really can't. And it's an exciting season. It's probably the most exciting year we've seen in Oklahoma, probably in a quarter century.
Well, let's talk about the governor's race. I'm very aware of who's not in the governor's race.
Yes, and Mick, I have to tell you, coming over here to tape, I was of a mixed mind because I wanted you to keep going on the one hand, but on the other hand, I'm very happy to see you today.
Well, it's good to be back on The Verdict. Kevin Stitt and the Republicans, Drew Edmondson and the Democrats, Chris Powell and the Libertarian Party. Kind of handicap the race.
Well, you know, it's an interesting race, and in any contest in Oklahoma, you start with the assumption of Republican advantage, okay? But this is not a typical year in Oklahoma. You know, we've had this tremendous wave of, this wave of outpouring of support for educators and for teachers. For the first time in a quarter century, we raised taxes through a Republican legislature, and we have really very contrasting candidates among the major frontrunners. You know, Drew Edmondson has been on the ballot in Oklahoma for over a quarter century, right? And comes from one of the oldest families in Oklahoma politics. Father, uncle, cousins, all in politics. J. Howard Edmondson was the youngest governor in the history of the state and got elected in the Edmondson Prairie Fire 60 years ago. And then we got Kevin Stitt, who
My
was still...
goodness, I remember that.
Yeah. And then we have Kevin Stitt, who was in high school the first time Drew Edmondson appeared on a major party ballot, right? And Stitt's from Norman, large family, Gateway Mortgage, very successful businessman. You talk to folks in Norman who he went to school with. He is the most successful person to come out of that class and was always kind of a leader and a presence growing up. But very, very different experiences. Drew Edmondson, probably the longest resume in Oklahoma politics right now. Attorney General, prosecutor, congressional candidate. Kevin Stitt, first time he's run for office. And very different perspectives on a lot of issues. And it sets up a real contrast for fall because Edmondson's well defined. And Kevin Stitt is still being defined and is still defining himself. And actually, and we talked about this the last time I was on, is still getting a handle on and learning about the nature of electoral politics and learning about the nature of the governorship. And it leaves him a lot of latitude to define himself. But it also leaves a lot of latitude for real contrast. And one thing we saw in polling, Mick, was you ran better in a general election in a matchup with Drew Edmondson than Kevin Stitt did. Does Kevin Stitt consolidate those Republicans, bring them back home? Or does this independent, Chris Powell, the libertarian, does he become a parking place for Republicans that find some reason not to vote for Kevin Stitt? That's the thing we're waiting to see.
And it's a fascinating, and there's national implications to this as well. And there are a lot of people who are gravitating toward President Trump, and his appeal kind of filters into this race as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing is every election out there, it's a question of how Trumpy it's going to get, right? How Trumpy will this election get? And should Kevin Stitt find himself in a tight race with Drew Edmondson, I imagine that we will see President Trump getting engaged with this race and expressing himself as he is wont to do. Although there are other challenges, which is, President Trump is more popular in Oklahoma than most anywhere in the country.
Well, I ran into a lot of Trump Democrats on the campaign trail, and so how Drew Edmondson handles the Trumpyism, to use your term, how he handles that is going to be intriguing as well.
Yeah, it is. And I think with Drew Edmondson, if you're looking at this campaign, there's been a tendency among Democrats historically to take a Me Too approach when running statewide. But the Democratic Party electorate that's out there is very different from the old one. It's getting younger. It's simultaneously very old and very young. And as we look down ticket, we're going to see a lot of candidates who appeal to the nature of younger voters out there in Oklahoma, people under 40. And that's where the Democrats will have to win, is they're going to have to mobilize, and they're going to have to mobilize folks who weren't typically showing up at a midterm. We're looking at a high turnout general election simply because it's a stimulated environment. It's going to be high turnout around the country with an open seat congressional race in District 1, multiple open contests on the statewide ballot, and the state legislature still being in flux. A lot of incentives for parties to get voters out to the polls.
Talk about the lieutenant governor's race. Matt Pinnell and
Anastasia Pittman. Yeah, and also running as an independent. Septuagenarian, maybe octogenarian, former Democratic Party Chairman Ivan Holmes. I didn't know that until I was driving over here, and I'm having my son click through the phone, double checking the ballots, and here Ivan is showing up. Matt Pinnell, both state and national party experience, a rising star in the state GOP, comes out of a highly contested runoff, defeating Dana Murphy to win the nomination.
Were you surprised at that?
No, I wasn't. We had, typically you expect women to run better in runoffs than men, but Pinnell had led the initial round. And really, these were both candidates who were very well known to Republican Party establishment. And even though Pinnell had not been on the ballot before, was known to Republican voters and had a very professional organization, turnout operation, presented a strong case for the nomination. And then former state lawmaker Anastasia Pittman, one of two African Americans who have been nominated statewide by the Democrats. So for the first time ever in Oklahoma, we have two major party candidates in one party who are African Americans seeking statewide office. The other would be Mark Miles over in the Attorney General's race. Lieutenant Governor's race, is going to be a Republican-favored contest, more than likely. Pittman is going to have to engage in outreach beyond the Democratic base, and to be honest, is going to have to mitigate against the tendency of white Oklahomans in general to vote against Democrats, but especially to vote against Democrats who are not white. okay? That's just a reality of Oklahoma, it's a reality of the South. So Pittman presents the opportunity to jump past that. Whether or not she succeeds is another question.
Let me ask a question related to that, related to the lieutenant governor race. On our ballot in November will be the state question about joining up the lieutenant governor and governor to run as a team.
Yes.
What is you, as a political scientist, what do you think about that?
I think it's probably a pretty good idea. I mean, I've always been somewhat indifferent on that issue. I think we have too many statewide elected officials and too many ballot opportunities. It's a residual of our populist constitution from 1907, the one that Alfalfa Bill Murray basically gave us. I would actually prefer to see fewer statewide elected officers and an executive reorganization in general, because we also have a very weak governorship. But having a governor and lieutenant governor of the same party campaigning as a ticket is not unusual in the United States. And in many states around the country, they do that. Florida probably being the prime example of the use of a governor, lieutenant governor ticket approach. I think it assures that for a governor, should they have to vacate the office, they've got a greater prospect for continuity. But it also turns the nomination process into a team effort, which means if you're an ambitious politician, you're going to have to pick who you're going to partner up with when you run.
I can't remember my history well enough. Have we ever had a lieutenant governor of a different party than the governor?
Often.
We have. I think Mary Fallon served 2 years as lieutenant governor under Brad Henry.
Yeah.
The most recent example, as I recall.
Yeah, and that is probably the prime example, but yeah, it has happened in the past. So, and in fact, I believe George Nye served as lieutenant governor under at least one Republican governor,
He
as I
served
recall.
as lieutenant governor forever.
Yeah, and had, 14 tours as either governor or acting governor. And Governor Nye, good to see that you're watching today, and we know that he is. So, and who was the running mate on the Edmondson Prairie Fire ticket? Actually, he was Drew Evanson's 30-year-old lieutenant governor.
Well, all the, and I'm going to call it noise, and I don't mean to be demeaning, but all the noise nationally about the midterm elections, how is that going to spill over into our state elections, or will it?
Well, it's going to spill in part because we have local noise that plays in as well. We have an open seat congressional election in District 1, which is not the best Democratic opportunity that exists if it were open. The best open seat for the Democrats is the Oklahoma City district, but it's not open. It has Steve Russell, who has proven to be a competent and popular congressman. In just a couple of terms, he's carved out a nice space in representing his district, and has managed to run below radar on most controversies that have been aimed at Congress. Steve is very good at his job in that respect. But Kendra Horn constitutes a very strong potential challenger, a strong female candidate running on the Democratic side.
And she's running a funded campaign, too.
Indeed she is.
I mean, the Democrats are not giving up that seat.
Yeah, but these demographics up in Tulsa in District 1 are intriguing. I mean, that's a district that's changing. And it's a seat the Democrats have chipped away at but never won since Jim Jones vacated it back in the 80s. But, if you look at that race, I'd have to, if you go back and you double check in the notes on that contest, when you're looking at Kevin Hearn, what a powerful candidate. McDonald's franchisee, Turnpike Authority chairman, a Republican businessman running in a Republican district. This is a good candidacy. It's a strong candidacy, but by the same token, Tim Gilpin is a solid challenger for the Democrats. If there's a blue wave at work that sweeps into Oklahoma, District 1 is where you'd expect to see it hit, okay? The other thing is, in terms of our statewide offices, if there's a blue wave, it hits the governorship, maybe less of the lieutenant governorship, maybe it hits the attorney general's office, maybe it hits state superintendent, but I doubt it. It's really an interesting environment. I think a lot of the damage to the status quo was done in the primaries, in the cleaning out of the state legislature, in the Republican primary.
Keith Gaddie is our guest. We'll have more on Oklahoma politics when we return on The Verdict.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams rank number 2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to the Set of the Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers, and our guest is Keith Gaddie. We're talking about the November election, and along with the candidate issues and the statewide and all the local candidates that'll be on your ballot, there'll be some state questions.
Yeah, there will. We have several things that are coming up, several issues that have been somewhat pressing in the state for a while. We do a lot of things different in Oklahoma. And, in the last few years, we've done things like change liquor by the pour. We've changed the sale of cold, high alcohol content beer. We're moving in a direction where, in a variety of areas, our retail space looks like the rest of the nation. Mm-hmm. And one thing we look down and we see is, we've got this very interesting issue that appears to run below radar, which is allowing optometrists to practice inside retail spaces. Mm-hmm. Around most of the country, if you go into, say, a Walmart and they have an optical store there, there'll be an optometrist who's actually practicing in store. You can't currently do that in Oklahoma. And this issue will be on the ballot confronting the electorate, and it will be well funded in terms of the yes side. One thing we know up here in Tulsa is when optometrists get politically interested, things tend to happen. And so this is a very interesting issue. It's technical in nature, but it goes towards bringing how we do things in a retail space in line with the rest of the country, and actually presents an opportunity to make things a little more cost effective for the typical Oklahoman. Yeah.
On the House Senate races, there's a lot of teachers that are going to be on the ballot across the state, and there's also those that either voted for or against the tax increase with that money going to teachers' salaries. How does all that play into the electorate?
Well, a good chunk of the so-called the platform caucus really got devastated in the primaries and in the runoffs. We had a dozen incumbents get bumped off in the state house alone who had voted against these tax increases. And against the teacher pay raises. Only one member of the platform caucus has made it through unscathed and is guaranteed to make their way back to the next legislature. The question is whether or not that fire keeps burning. Is that enough change? Joy Hoffmeister had advocated for more educational spending and had advocated for increased revenue for schools back during the last legislative session. Nonetheless got thrown into a runoff which she prevailed in. We'll be beating the drum for this in the general election. The two gubernatorial candidates are marked contrasts over this issue. We know the public is largely with the teachers. The question is, does the campaign debate turn in such a manner that what is sold is, well, enough has been done. Is this enough? And now we need to move on to the next thing and talk about doing things for other elements of state government. I'm not sure how well that plays, because one thing we saw up in Owasso, when we look at the runoff up there for the state house, is we had an incumbent lawmaker running up in District 80 who had argued against teacher pay raises and against increased taxes, and then came back and said, yeah, we need to do more for teachers, but there are all these other public employees, mainly ones who have guns, who also need to be paid more. And the problem with trying to shadow the education issue with other issues in the state right now is it looks like gaslighting. Okay, it looks like what you're trying to do is turn up the flame on other issues to obscure the real need that exists in education. Education, common ed, is the main thing state government does. Okay, people can look at prisons or look at highways, or at universities for that matter, but common ed's the majority of the budget. That is state government. And if you're not taking care of that one thing the public cares about, it's very difficult to shine light on other issues.
The education professionals had a number of folks on the ballot this time, and I think from what you've said, many of them did quite well. This movement was not limited to Oklahoma. We saw it in Arizona, we saw it in Kentucky, we saw it other places. Do you know how those candidates from other states, the education candidates from other states fared?
I have not been really following up on that.
Okay.
But the thing is, this education issue is spreading, and one thing we know about educators is they tend to make really good candidates for public office for a couple of reasons. One is if you can stand up in front of kids and convince them, because kids are actually the biggest skeptics and the biggest critics in the world, right? Fool a kid, fool a dog, right? Good luck. They're very good at pitching themselves, okay? And if they're funded and if they're trained and they've got good backup in terms of mobilizing the vote, they can do quite well. The second thing is they bring interesting networks. Everybody in the state either is related to a teacher or knows a teacher, the odds are, and tend to think favorably of them and know how underpaid they are. Most teacher candidates who are running as challengers will probably lose, for the simple reason that most challengers lose, right? But we're going to really test this proposition out. We're going to see what happens. I mean, it's funny, down in Alabama, which is demographically very similar to Oklahoma, one thing we know about the legislature down there is that for decades, a majority of the legislature was retired teachers. And that meant that they would keep education relatively well funded. So teachers need a direct presence, but we have a more fundamental problem in Oklahoma, which is term limits cause us to constantly overturn real talent in both parties and real expertise. And a lot of serious people don't get into politics because it's just such a churn and burn. You can't just go up there and be a good lawmaker. If you have ambitions to lead, you have to act on it immediately, or you're going to fall by the wayside and not get to do anything. And we're looking at a situation right now, the legislature next session, 70% of lawmakers will either be in their first or second term. There's no institutional memory up there beyond the pro tem and the majority leader in the state house right now. Most of those folks have only been there for 2 to 4 years. And that's a tough environment to work in where everybody's learning the job.
Talk about the Attorney General's race.
Yeah.
Mike Hunter and Mark Miles.
Yes. Yeah, well, I think...
Is there a third candidate, by the way?
Well, let's check our notes here and make sure. I was looking into that on the way up. Attorney General race does not have an independent candidate. Mark Miles, OSU graduate, OU Law, private attorney, running as a Democratic nominee. Mike Hunter, appointed to fill out the last 2 years of the term of the Attorney General's office after Scott Pruitt resigned to become EPA director. This is a race that should naturally incline to favor the Republican. Mike Hunter has been a solid Attorney General. And what's interesting about Hunter is when there have been conflicts between him and the rest of the Republican establishment where he feels they've been out of bounds with law, or between him and state government where they've been out of bounds with the law, he's been a consistent voice for the law over politics, okay? So if you look back, for example, and you look at these issues over medicinal marijuana and regulations related to it, Hunter was one of the first people to step out and indicate that the state board was going too far in their actions. So this is a fellow who knows how to lay aside politics in the execution of this very important job. In fact, if you had to keep 2 statewide offices elected in this state, it'd be governor and attorney general. These are the 2 most important offices that exist in state government. And Mike Hunter has positioned himself well to do what attorney generals tend to do, which is get reelected.
Keith Gaddie's been our guest on The Verdict. Keith, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much.
It's all going to be
again.
very
Thank you, Kent.
exciting coming up here in November. Kent and I'll have a final word when we return.
Big Tobacco lied for decades about the adverse health effects of smoking. Legally, here's what tobacco companies are forced to say now. Here's what they're really saying. Get the truth behind the lies at StopsWithMe.com, a program of TSET.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, Each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
We are a very conservative family, and we believe in old-fashioned family values. We have a loving home there, and we love kids, and we have 5, 6 of our own. And but I had no idea we were going to go into adoption, but it's been very gratifying.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
We are back on The Verdict. Thanks for joining us today. Keith Gaddie was our guest. We talked about all of the statewide elections and in general about all of the state house races, because it really does feel like November 6th is going to be a pivotal time in our state's history. We're kind of at a lot of trends are conforming here.
Well, it really will be, I think, the most interesting non-presidential general election I can remember in Oklahoma, and I think for a lot of states as well. We'll see whether there's a blue wave or not, or who gets swept under or taken out with the riptide. It depends. Keith is always good with his time, and he's really knowledgeable and a real expert in this area. And he had to drive over here to Tulsa again to join us to tape, and we're really glad that he gave us that.
Open seat governor, open seat lieutenant governor, and in the AG race, Mike Hunter's never been on a ballot before in a November election. So there's a lot of moving parts here. We have a couple of websites I'll draw your attention to. You can get more information about Keith Gaddie at ou.edu, and you can get more information on The Verdict at theverdict.tv. Tell us about a guest you'd like to see on a future show. That's going to do it, though. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next week here on The Verdict.